They laughed when she claimed her mother was a Navy SEAL. The hearing was supposed to be private, but somehow 200 people packed the community center to watch her humiliation. Embry sat alone at the table while the superintendent held up her college essay like evidence of a crime. The whispers grew louder. "Pathological liar," someone said, not bothering to lower their voice. What started as an academic review had become a public trial, but they didn't know about the black SUV pulling up outside, or why her grandfather kept checking his watch with such certainty. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing for more moments of unexpected vindication. The fluorescent lights of Mercer County Community Center buzzed overhead as 16-year-old Embry Callister sat alone at the table, her posture military straight despite the tremor in her hands. The converted basketball court had been arranged like a courtroom, with Superintendent Lowell Hargrove's imposing figure centered behind a raised desk, flanked by 4 Board of Education members. "This character assessment hearing is now in session," Hargrove announced, his voice carrying through speakers to the 200 townspeople who had somehow discovered the time and location of what should have been a private academic review. "We're here to address concerns regarding Embry Callister's college application materials, specifically her personal essay which contains," he paused for effect, "questionable claims." Embry's eyes scanned the crowd until they found her grandfather. Retired Colonel Thaddeus Callister sat in the back row, spine rigid, expression unreadable beneath his silver crew cut. He offered a nearly imperceptible nod, their private signal since childhood. "Stay strong, give nothing away." Ms. Winslade approached the microphone, clutching papers with a reluctance that showed in her pinched expression. The English teacher had been the first to read Embry's essay, the first to question its authenticity, and now looked torn between professional obligation and growing discomfort. "I've been asked to read portions of Miss Callister's essay," she began, voice wavering. "While other mothers attended PTA meetings, mine was deployed with Naval Special Warfare Development Group. While other mothers taught their daughters to bake, mine taught me to swim with weighted ankles and hold my breath for 3 minutes. My mother, Commander Zephyr Callister, was among the first women to complete SEAL training, though her existence remains classified." Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone snickered. "That's enough, Ms. Winsley," Hargrove interrupted. "Dr. Fleming, your professional assessment?" The town psychiatrist adjusted his glasses with practiced precision. "I believe we're witnessing a textbook case of compensatory fantasy formation. Given the extended absence of her mother, Embry has constructed an elaborate alternative reality in which her mother's abandonment is reframed as heroic service." "I haven't been abandoned," Embry said, her voice quiet but clear, "and I haven't lied." "Then perhaps you can explain this?" Hargrove produced an official-looking document. "Your mother's naval service record, obtained through proper channels. Zephyr Callister, Administrative Specialist, Naval Support Facility, honorable discharge 8 years ago. Not a single notation about special operations, not one deployment to a combat zone." Embry's face remained impassive, though something flickered in her eyes. "That's her cover record." The laughter started low, then spread like wildfire. "Cover record," Hargrove repeated, smiling thinly. "Like in the spy movies? Intelligence protocols require—" "Let's continue," Hargrove cut her off. "Colonel Callister, as Embry's guardian and Zephyr's father, would you care to clarify this situation?" All eyes turned to the old soldier, who remained seated. "I have nothing to add to my granddaughter's statement." "Nothing to add? Or nothing to correct?" Hargrove pressed. The colonel checked his watch. "Nothing to add at this time." In the uncomfortable silence that followed, Embry closed her eyes briefly, remembering the midnight phone calls throughout her childhood. Her mother's voice, often distorted, sometimes speaking in the code they had developed. "The mermaid swims at midnight. The eagle returns at dawn." Childish phrases that meant, "I'm alive. I'm thinking of you. I'll come home someday." "If I may," Mayor Sutcliffe stood, straightening his tie, "given the seriousness of fabricating military service, perhaps Embry could enlighten us about her mother's supposed classified missions." And so it began, the questions becoming more pointed, the disbelief more palpable with each response. Embry answered with precision when she could, remained silent when she couldn't, exactly as her mother had taught her. Outside, unnoticed by the crowd hungry for scandal, A black SUV with government plates pulled up behind the community center. The clock on the wall read 3:47 p.m. Colonel Thaddeus Callister checked his watch again. 3:47 p.m. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes now held something new: anticipation. By the hearing's second hour, the pretense of educational concern had evaporated completely. What remained was public spectacle, a community united in their certainty that the quiet, odd girl from the edge of town had finally revealed the depths of her delusion. "So these midnight swims your mother supervised," Mayor Sutcliffe continued, barely concealing his amusement. "They were training for what exactly? Your future career as a Navy SEAL?" "Recovery techniques for water insertions," Embry answered mechanically, fatigue evident in her voice. "And no, I don't plan to follow her path." "Wise decision," someone called from the back, triggering another wave of laughter. Warren Pike wheeled himself to the designated public comment area, the medals on his Vietnam veteran cap glinting under the lights. His weathered face had grown increasingly troubled throughout the proceedings, but his voice carried the hardened edge of someone who'd seen combat. "I've got some questions about these so-called SEAL operations," he announced. "What's the proper protocol for HAHO jumps versus HALO jumps?" Embry's eyes met his. "High-altitude high opening requires deployment of the parachute shortly after exiting the aircraft, creating distance between the jump point and landing zone. High-altitude low opening means free-falling to approximately 2,000 feet before deployment, providing less canopy time and higher precision." Pike's eyebrows rose slightly. "Equipment check before water infill? Rebreather functionality, dry suit integrity, comms check, weapons waterproofing, mission package security," Embry recited, "plus individual team checks based on specialized gear for the operation." A muscle twitched in Pike's jaw. "That's something anyone could learn from movies or video games?" Hargrove interrupted, clearly irritated by the technical exchange. "Dr. Fleming, would this level of detailed fantasy be consistent with your diagnosis?" The psychiatrist nodded sagely. "The more elaborate the fantasy, the more the subject invests in maintaining its integrity. I'm particularly concerned about the specificity. It suggests Embry has been nurturing this narrative for years." Someone's phone camera flashed. Another whispered, "Pathological liar," loud enough for the whisper to carry. Ms. Winslet, who had grown increasingly uncomfortable, attempted intervention. "Perhaps we should focus on the academic aspects." "I think we need to address the underlying issue," Hargrove countered, producing a photograph from his folder. He held it up for the room to see. A woman in standard Navy dress blues, her resemblance to Embry unmistakable despite the decade-old timestamp. "This is Zephyr Callister's official service photo. Not exactly SEAL material, is she?" The laughter that followed held an ugly edge. For the first time, Embry's composure cracked. "You don't know anything about her." "We know she's not here," Hargrove said with false sympathy. "We know she hasn't attended a single parent-teacher conference or school event in your entire high school career. We know that fabricating military service is not only dishonest, but disrespectful to actual service members, like Mr. Pike." Pike's expression darkened, but he remained silent, studying Embry with new intensity. In the distance, the faint sound of helicopter rotors thudded against the afternoon air, but the crowd was too engrossed in the unfolding drama to notice. Colonel Callister checked his watch again. 4:13 p.m. "Let me be clear," Hargrove continued, warming to his role as moral authority. "This hearing isn't about punishment. It's about getting you the help you need. Dr. Fleming has recommended intensive therapy, and the board is prepared to amend your academic record to mitigate the impact of this unfortunate situation." Smartphones emerged throughout the crowd, ready to capture whatever came next. Embry's humiliation had become the day's entertainment. Clips already circulating on local social media with mocking captions. The helicopter sounds grew louder, then abruptly ceased. "She said someday I'd understand why she couldn't be here," Embry finally said, voice cracking. "That someday they'd know she existed." "Well," Hargrove leaned forward, scenting victory. "Where is she then? Where is this phantom SEAL mother of yours?" The community center doors swung open with practiced precision, the hydraulic hinges hissing in perfect synchronization. Conversation died instantly. 6 figures in naval combat uniforms entered in perfect formation, boots striking the linoleum in measured cadence. Their faces betrayed nothing, no anger, no judgment, only the focused presence of operators accustomed to high-stakes environments. The naval warfare tridents on their uniforms gleamed under the fluorescent lights. In their center walked Commander Zephyr Callister. At 42, she carried herself with the coiled readiness of someone who had spent decades in environments where hesitation meant death. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, her uniform adorned with ribbons and insignia that only a handful of people in the room could properly identify. Her eyes, exact duplicates of Embry's, scanned the room once before locking onto her daughter's face. Recognition dawned on Warren Pike's face first. His body responded before his mind fully processed what he was seeing. Spine straightening, right hand lifting in a perfect salute, despite years in a wheelchair. Zephyr acknowledged him with the slightest nod before continuing her advance toward the front of the room, her team moving in synchronized precision around her. The crowd parted instinctively. Conversation suspended mid-word. Hargrove's mouth opened and closed without sound. Without speaking, Zephyr placed a classified folder on Hargrove's table. The red border and executive seals were unmistakable. She opened it with deliberate movements, revealing documents that even from a distance were clearly marked with various security classifications. "These were declassified at 0600 this morning," she said, her voice steady and carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent room. It was the first time she had spoken, and the authority in her tone left no room for interruption. The team spread through the room, positioning themselves at strategic points while Hargrove stared at the contents of the folder. Redacted mission reports, presidential commendations, photographs of Zephyr with 3 different administrations, and operational citations that contained more blacked-out text than readable content. The final document bore the presidential seal, an executive order signed that morning, declassifying Zephyr's service record and acknowledging the existence of a specialized unit of female operators that had been active for 15 years. Colonel Thaddeus Callister finally rose from his seat, his voice carrying the weight of decades of military service. "My daughter couldn't defend herself, but she made sure her daughter wouldn't suffer the same silence." Hargrove found his voice honeyed now with sudden respect. "Commander Callister, had we known—" Zephyr silenced him with a raised hand. When she spoke again, her words were measured, precise. "My daughter has shown more courage in this room than I've seen in some combat zones. She told the truth when lying would have been easier." She turned to face the crowd, her gaze sweeping over the same people who minutes earlier had been laughing at her child. "For 15 years, I've served in operations that required my existence to remain classified. That meant missing birthdays, school events, and ordinary moments most take for granted. It meant my daughter carried a truth she couldn't share, even when sharing would have been easier." Warren Pike wheeled himself forward, his weathered face tight with emotion. "I served 30 years and never knew," he said, addressing the crowd. "Some of you laughed at this girl. I want those people to look at the medals on Commander Callister's uniform and tell me what you've done that gives you the right." Nobody spoke. Ms. Winslet stepped forward, collecting Embry's essay from the table where it had been left like evidence of wrongdoing. She returned it with hands that trembled slightly. "This deserves more than an A," she said quietly. "This deserves to be heard." Embry stood, legs unsteady after hours of sitting rigid under scrutiny. When she finally reached her mother, their embrace spoke of years of absence compressed into a single moment. "I'm sorry it took so long to come home," Zephyr whispered against her daughter's hair. Hargrove attempted one final assertion of authority. This meeting is adjourned," Colonel Callister stated with finality. The SEAL team formed an honor corridor as Embry, Zephyr, and Colonel Thaddeus exited the community center, leaving behind a room full of people confronting their collective shame. 6 months later, Embry Callister stood before a congressional hearing on women in combat roles, her testimony carrying the weight of first-hand experience with the costs of secrecy and the power of truth finally spoken aloud. "My mother never asked for recognition," she concluded, her voice steady as Zephyr watched proudly from the gallery. "She only wanted to serve, but sometimes the greatest service is allowing your truth to be seen, not for glory, but so others know they're not alone in theirs." The hearing room erupted in applause, a stark contrast to the mockery she'd faced in Mercer County. Representative Alvarez, the committee chairwoman, leaned into her microphone. "Miss Callister, your testimony today will help shape policy for generations of service members. Thank you for your courage." As Embry gathered her notes, a congressional aide approached with a message. "They're waiting for you in the rotunda." Outside the hearing room, a group of young women in Naval Academy uniforms stood at attention. Their leader, a first-year cadet with determined eyes, stepped forward. "Ms. Callister, we wanted to thank you personally. Your mother's declassified service record is now required reading at the Academy." Embry smiled, still unused to the recognition that had followed the revelation of her mother's career. "I'm just the messenger." "Sometimes the messenger changes everything," the cadet replied. Back in Mercer County, the changes had been equally profound but far more complicated. The community center, scene of Embry's public humiliation, had been renamed the Callister Veterans Hall. The same people who had laughed now spoke of Zephyr and Embry with performative pride, claiming connection to the town's most famous residents. Mayor Sutcliffe had resigned after leaked video of his questioning went viral. His political aspirations collapsed under the weight of public disgust. Dr. Fleming had closed his practice, moving to a neighboring state. Superintendent Hargrove remained, though his authority had been permanently diminished, his previous confidence replaced by a cautious deference whenever the Callister family was mentioned. Only Warren Pike had earned genuine forgiveness. The Vietnam veteran had visited the Callister home the day after the hearing, wheeling himself up the long driveway to offer a formal apology. "I knew something wasn't adding up," he told Zephyr as they sat on the porch. "The way she answered my questions, the precision. But I didn't speak up when I should have." "You're speaking up now," Zephyr had replied, offering him coffee. "That's what matters." The letters began arriving the following week, hundreds of them from all corners of the country, from daughters and sons of service members whose contributions remained in shadow. From young women inspired to pursue paths others claimed they couldn't walk. From people who had carried truths others refused to believe. Colonel Thaddeus had converted his study into an impromptu mailroom, carefully organizing each letter by location and theme. "Your mother received letters like these too," he told Embry one evening as they sorted through the day's delivery. After her first deployment, when the program was still experimental, women from across the services wrote to her handler, not knowing her name but knowing she existed. "Did she ever get to read them?" Embry asked. "Years later, when certain aspects were declassified," the colonel replied. "They meant everything to her, knowing she'd open doors. That's why she was so determined to come home when your essay situation developed. She understood what it meant to be visible." The colonel extracted a letter from his pocket, worn at the edges from repeated handling. "This one came for you yesterday. Special delivery." The presidential seal was unmistakable. Embry opened it carefully, her hands steadier than they had been in the community center months earlier. "The White House Correspondents' Dinner," she read aloud. "They want both of us to attend." "Your mother is being awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom," the colonel explained, "not just for her service, but for what her visibility means for future generations." That night, Embry sat on the roof outside her bedroom window, a childhood habit from years of scanning the horizon for signs of her mother's return. The stars were particularly bright, unhampered by cloud cover or ambient light from their rural property. Footsteps on the shingles announced Zephyr's arrival. Without speaking, she settled beside her daughter, their shoulders touching. "Do you miss it?" Embry finally asked. "The operations, the team." Zephyr considered the question with the same deliberation she applied to everything. "I miss the clarity," she admitted, "the purpose. But I don't miss the absence. 15 years of being a ghost in your life was too high a price." "Was it worth it?" "What you accomplished." "The missions?" "Yes, most of them," Zephyr said. "The groundwork for women in special operations?" "Absolutely. But the cost to you," she paused, finding her daughter's hand in the darkness. "I'm still calculating that debt." "There's no debt," Embry said firmly. "You did what you believed was right." "So did I." Below them, a car turned into the long driveway, headlights sweeping across the property. Colonel Thaddeus emerged onto the porch, posture straightening automatically despite his age and the late hour. "More reporters," Zephyr sighed. "They're persistent." "This one's different," Embry said, recognizing the car. "It's Miss Winslet, The English teacher had been the first from Mercer County High School to apologize, returning Embry's essay with an A+ and a handwritten note of contrition. Unlike others in town, her remorse seemed genuine, uncomplicated by self-interest or reputation management. "She's been helping me revise my book," Embry explained. "The one about daughters of classified service members. There are more of us than anyone realized." Zephyr's eyebrows lifted. "Book? When did this happen?" "After the third publisher called," Embry said with a small smile. "Apparently my college essay has commercial potential." They watched as the colonel greeted Ms. Winslade, directing her inside with the formal courtesy that characterized all his interactions. "I've been thinking about your future," Zephyr said carefully. "After graduation." Embry tensed slightly. Future plans had been a source of tension before the revelation, her mother's absence making long-term discussions difficult. "I've been accepted to Georgetown," she reminded Zephyr. "Political science with a minor in strategic studies." "I know, your acceptance letter is framed in my quarters," Zephyr said. "But there's another option if you're interested. The Academy has extended an invitation." "Naval Academy?" "I never applied. This wouldn't be a traditional application. Special appointment based on demonstrated aptitude and unique qualifications," Zephyr explained. "No pressure either way. Your grandfather nearly choked when I mentioned it, said one military legacy was enough." Embry laughed, picturing the colonel's reaction. Then she grew serious. "Do you want me to accept?" "I want you to choose your own path," Zephyr said firmly. "That's why I came back, why I pushed for declassification, even though it meant the end of field operations for me. So you could make choices with all the information, not just fragments." From below, Ms. Winslade's voice carried up to them. "Embry," the publisher called, "they want to move up the release date." "We should go down," Embry said, but remained seated, reluctant to end this rare moment of quiet connection. "1 minute more," Zephyr agreed, leaning back to study the stars, with the same intensity she'd once applied to mission briefings. "Georgetown or Annapolis, author or student or both, the choice is yours. But whatever you decide, I'll be visible this time, present." "Promise?" Embry asked, suddenly sounding younger than her 17 years. "On my trident," Zephyr said solemnly, invoking the SEAL symbol that represented everything she'd achieved and sacrificed. "No more ghosts in this family." At the Mercer County Community Pool that summer, Embry taught younger girls to swim with weighted ankles, her mother observing from the bleachers. The same community that had once mocked her now watched in quiet reverence as Commander Zephyr Callister shared occasional tips on technique, her presence no longer a secret, her expertise no longer denied. One afternoon, Warren Pike wheeled himself onto the pool deck, accompanied by his granddaughter, a serious 9-year-old with determined eyes. "Commander Callister," he said formally, "Skylar here has been asking about joining the special swim class." Zephyr evaluated the girl with a professional's assessment. "It's demanding training, Mr. Pike. Not recreational." "I can do demanding," Skylar said, chin lifting in unconscious mimicry of Embry's posture during the hearing. "I want to learn everything." Embry caught her mother's eye across the pool, a silent question passing between them. Zephyr nodded once. "Tomorrow morning, 5 a.m., Embry told Skylar. "Don't be late." As Pike wheeled away, he paused beside Zephyr. "They're building a statue of you, you know, for the Veterans Memorial." Zephyr grimaced. "Unnecessary." "Maybe," Pike acknowledged. "But the girls like Skylar, the ones watching you and your daughter, they need to see it's possible, that the path exists, even when people tell them it doesn't." Across town, in what had once been the Sutcliffe Civic Building and was now the Veterans Affairs Office, Colonel Thaddeus Callister sat across from Ms. Winslade, reviewing the manuscript that had grown from Embry's college essay into a comprehensive account of military families living under classification constraints. "She has your directness," Ms. Winslade observed, watching the colonel's expression as he read, "and her mother's precision." "She has her own voice," the colonel corrected gently. "Always did, even when no one was listening." The manuscript's final chapter included testimonials from dozens of children of classified service members, their experiences finally validated, their stories emerging from imposed shadows. The dedication page bore a simple inscription. For those who carried truths, others weren't cleared to hear. The truth once revealed had changed more than just Embry's story. It had changed what stories others believed possible. On the eve of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Embry stood in the guest bedroom of their Washington, D.C. hotel suite, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror. The navy blue dress uniform that had been delivered that morning fit perfectly, though she hadn't submitted any measurements. The Presidential Military Liaison Office had resources and methods that remained classified even in this new era of transparency. "Is this appropriate?" she asked as her mother entered the room. "I'm not enlisted or commissioned." Zephyr, resplendent in her own formal uniform, with its rows of ribbons and insignia, approached to adjust Embry's collar. The president specifically requested it. Honorary uniform for the daughter of a Medal of Freedom recipient. Unprecedented, but then again, so is our situation. Colonel Thaddeus appeared in the doorway, his own dress uniform meticulously pressed despite being decades old. "The car arrives in 15 minutes, he announced, his voice catching slightly at the sight of his daughter and granddaughter in matching naval attire. "They're expecting significant media presence." "When aren't they?" Embry murmured, thinking of the journalists who had camped outside their Mercer County home for weeks after the hearing, desperate for exclusive content about the female SEAL operator whose existence had been classified for 15 years. The colonel's expression softened. "Different this time. You both control the narrative now." Control had been the operative word in the months following their dramatic exit from the community center. Zephyr had insisted on strategic management of their sudden visibility, applying the same tactical precision to media engagement that she had once used in combat operations. No unplanned interviews, no reactive statements, only carefully coordinated appearances that advanced specific objectives regarding women in special operations. The Pentagon had initially resisted the level of disclosure Zephyr demanded, but public fascination with her story had forced unprecedented cooperation. What had begun as damage control evolved into a coordinated campaign to recognize the contributions of women in classified roles throughout military history. "Your old team will be there tonight," the colonel mentioned casually, though the significance of the statement was anything but casual. The 5 operators who had accompanied Zephyr into the community center that day had remained largely anonymous, returning to their duties while their commander became the public face of their unit. "All 5 confirmed?" Zephyr asked, her tone neutral, though Embry detected the undercurrent of emotion. "Affirmative. First public appearance as a complete unit. The president wants a photo," the colonel replied. "Of course he does," Zephyr said dryly. "Election year." Embry smoothed her jacket, fingers tracing the honorary insignia that had been specially created for the occasion. "Will Warren Pike be there?" His foundation received an invitation. The Veterans Visibility Project that Pike had established following the hearing had gained national attention, providing resources for service members transitioning from classified to public roles. What had begun as his personal atonement for failing to support Embry had evolved into a nationwide support network. "He'll be seated at our table," the colonel confirmed, "along with that English teacher of yours." "Ms. Winsley," Embry corrected automatically. "She has a name, grandfather." The colonel's lip twitched in what might have been amusement. "Indeed she does. As do the 17 publishers currently bidding for your book rights, according to her latest update." The manuscript that had grown from Embry's college essay had sparked an unexpected bidding war, with major publishers competing for the first-person account of life as the daughter of a classified operator. Embry had insisted that proceeds be directed to scholarships for children of special operations personnel, a decision that had only intensified media interest in her story. A gentle knock at the hotel room door interrupted their conversation. The colonel excused himself to answer it, while Zephyr conducted a final inspection of Embry's uniform. "You're ready," she said finally, the simple statement carrying layers of meaning between them. "For a dinner? Or for whatever comes next?" Embry asked. "Both," Zephyr replied, "though I'm still not convinced about Annapolis." The Naval Academy appointment remained a point of gentle contention between them, with Zephyr concerned about the weight of legacy and expectation, while Embry increasingly saw it as a natural extension of her journey. "Georgetown is still in the running," Embry assured her. "Political science opens different doors. All that matters is they're doors you choose to walk through," Zephyr said firmly, "not obligations you feel because of my path." The colonel reappeared, his expression uncharacteristically animated. There's someone here you both should meet. He stepped aside to reveal a young woman in an army dress uniform, her posture military perfect despite her obvious nervousness. Lieutenant Farah Dela Cruz, she introduced herself, extending a hand first to Zephyr, then to Embry. Army intelligence officer, formerly attached to special activities. Formerly, Zephyr inquired, professional interest evident in her tone. Declassified last month, ma'am, following the executive order that's being called the Callister Doctrine, the lieutenant explained. I'm one of 23 female operators whose service records have been reclassified in preparation for tonight's ceremony. The significance of the number was not lost on any of them. 23 women, their contributions previously invisible, now acknowledged in a single policy revision. The president wanted you to know before the announcement, Lieutenant Dela Cruz continued. Your testimony didn't just change your own status, Commander. It created a framework for recognizing dozens of us. Embry watched her mother absorb this information, noting the subtle shift in her posture, the momentary flash of emotion quickly contained. 15 years of operational discipline didn't disappear overnight, even in moments of personal significance. Will the others be at the dinner? Zephyr asked. Front row, ma'am. We've been instructed to stand when you receive your medal, Dela Cruz confirmed. First public acknowledgement of the full program. After the lieutenant departed to rejoin her colleagues, the colonel, Zephyr, and Embry rode to the venue in contemplative silence. The Washington landmarks passed outside their tinted windows, monuments to a history that was being rewritten to include the contributions of those who had served in shadow. The red carpet leading to the ballroom was lined with journalists and photographers. Embry had grown accustomed to cameras in recent months, but the scale of tonight's media presence was unprecedented. Remember the protocols, Zephyr murmured as they approached the press line. No operational details, no team member names unless they've been cleared for disclosure. I know, Mom, Embry assured her. I've been living with classification protocols my entire life. They moved through the gauntlet of questions with practiced efficiency, offering measured responses to inquiries about the upcoming ceremony, while deflecting more probing requests for operational specifics. The colonel walked slightly behind them, his presence a reminder of the military legacy that linked 3 generations of their family. Inside the ballroom, their entrance caused a subtle ripple of recognition. Conversations paused, heads turned, and respect manifested in the straightened postures of military personnel scattered throughout the crowd. Warren Pike awaited them at their assigned table, rising from his wheelchair to offer a salute that Zephyr returned with formal precision. Beside him, Ms. Winslet stood in a simple black gown, her expression conveying the continued amazement at finding herself in such rarefied company. Commander, they've added a segment to the program, Pike informed them quietly. The president wants to acknowledge all 23 operators individually. That wasn't the agreement, Zephyr said, her voice taking on the edge that Embry recognized from tense moments. Some of those women still have security considerations. Voluntary participation only, Pike assured her. But from what I'm hearing, all 23 have opted in. Lieutenant Dela Cruz has been quite persuasive about the historical significance. As they took their seats, Embry noticed a formation of women in varied military uniforms positioned near the stage. Though they wore different branch insignia and rank markings, they shared a singular focus and presence that set them apart from the traditional military personnel in attendance. Your teammates, she murmured to her mother. Not just mine, Zephyr corrected softly. Yours too, in a different way. Every one of them has a family that carried the same burden yours did. Children who couldn't speak their truth. The presidential introduction was appropriately solemn, acknowledging the historical significance of the evening, while carefully navigating the classified aspects that remained protected. As Zephyr was called to the stage to receive her Medal of Freedom, the 23 women rose in perfect unison, their presence creating a visible manifestation of what had previously existed only in shadow. The president's remarks were brief but pointed. Today we recognize not just extraordinary service, but extraordinary sacrifice, not just by Commander Callister, but by her family who carried classified truths without the support or acknowledgement their sacrifice deserved. When Embry was unexpectedly invited to join her mother on stage, the applause intensified. The symbolism was lost on no one, a daughter and mother standing together after years of enforced separation and secrecy. The ceremony concluded with the formal introduction of the Women's Special Operations Historical Recognition Act, legislation that would create permanent mechanisms for acknowledging the contributions of female operators while respecting necessary security protocols. Later that evening, as the formal portions of the program gave way to dinner and measured socializing, Embry found herself approached by young women in military academy uniforms, congressional pages, and junior staffers, all drawn to her unique perspective on a world that had been invisible to them weeks earlier. Was it worth it? One Naval Academy cadet asked bluntly. The years of secrecy, the disbelief, the isolation. Embry considered the question while watching her mother across the room, now surrounded by her former team members, their collective presence commanding respectful distance from even the most persistent journalists. I used to ask her the same thing, Embry admitted. If the missions justified the absence, if the classified accomplishments balanced the missed moments. And what did she say? The cadet pressed. That the calculation was impossible, Embry replied. That service demands sacrifice, but the weight of those sacrifices isn't measured in medals or public recognition. Then how is it measured? Embry turned to fully face the younger woman, recognizing in her the same determined curiosity that had sustained her through years of carrying classified truths. By whether the truth, once it can finally be spoken, still matters, she said. By whether the doors you helped open remain open for those who follow. By whether the silence, when it's finally broken, was worth the sound it makes. Across the ballroom, Zephyr caught her daughter's eye and offered a small nod, the same signal they had exchanged in the community center months earlier, only now it carried a different meaning. Not stay strong, but well done. Not give nothing away, but everything has changed. The truth, once revealed, had changed more than just their story. It had changed what stories others believed possible.